Hello, everyone. Good morning. Happy New Year. Great to see you all joining in for our first Pilates session. Welcome, welcome. Hopefully you can see me okay and you can hear me okay. So today is session 1 of our Pilates class. And the Pilates class is geared towards beginners, so you don't need to have any Pilates experience at all. And throughout our series, we will be progressing some of the exercises, so they get a little harder every time as we get stronger in some of these exercises. So today we are on Zoom, and we are in the Zoom webinar function, which means that you are all automatically muted. And if you did have any questions during the class, I would encourage you to use the chat box function, which should be at the bottom of your screen. There should be a little chat icon. If you click on that, it'll open up the chat box, and you can type in your questions, or equally, you're welcome to raise your hand. There is a raise hand function on your screen at the bottom as well, if you wanted to use your voice to ask a question instead of typing. I will be moving with you throughout the class today, so I might not be able to answer the questions super quickly because I have to come up to the screen to see the questions, but definitely at the end of the class, we will have a couple minutes to go over any questions if anyone has any. So the way our class will run today, you can see I've got a little cot, which is my ottoman pulled out, set up behind me. We will be doing our class today starting in a seated position, and then we will transition to a lying down position, and then come back up to a seated position at the end of the class. So ideally, you should be using something that you can sit on and then lie down on. So for example, a couch. Or of course, if you're comfortable sitting on the floor, you're welcome to sit on the floor and then get into a lying position on the floor as well, whatever you're comfortable with. We will not be needing any equipment today. So it should be pretty barrier free. You're welcome to join in from anywhere. And the session is recorded, so if anybody wants to revisit the class at a later date, you're welcome to do so. The recording will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel, hopefully within the week, so in the next week or so before the next class, if you want to review the recording. Okay, I can see most people have trickled in now. Hopefully you can see me and hear me okay. We'll get started. I'm going to move back. If you have any questions, you're welcome to type in the chat box, or you could raise your hand, but I will be a little slow at answering because I have to come up to the screen to see the questions. But at the end of the class, you're welcome to stay on and ask any questions you may have. Okay, so just follow along to the best of your abilities. If there's anything that doesn't feel quite right, you're welcome to modify as needed. Okay, I'm going to move back. Okay, hopefully you can see me okay. We're going to start in a seated position, and we're going to make sure that our feet are flat onto the floor. I know you can't see my feet right now, but that's okay. You just want your feet flat onto the floor. And you want to sit forward on the surface that you're sitting on, whether that's the floor or a couch, and you're trying to let your spine be nice and upright. And all we're going to start here is we're going to place our hands onto our tummy muscles, shoulders away from the ears. Really think about elongating your spine all the way up towards the ceiling. So almost as if somebody is pulling the crown of your head up towards the ceiling. And all we're going to do here is we're going to start with some deep breath into the hands. And out. As you breathe into the tummy here, I want you to really feel the shoulders drop down into the ground. And the crown of the head reaching up towards the ceiling. 2 more. Nice and tall. 1 last one. Expanding into the belly. And then we're going to drop our arms down by our side. And we're going to start with some spinal rolls, chin down towards the chest. And you're going to roll one vertebrae column down at a time. Starting with your head, you're rolling down each spinal bone in your body till you're down into a position where you're looking at your navel. And then you're going to roll all the way back up one vertebrae at a time, just getting some movement into the spine. And again, rolling down, starting at the crown of the head, all the way down through each of your vertebrae. And then we're rolling all the way back up, one vertebrae at a time. The head is the last one to come up. Let's do one more. Rolling down. Making sure that you're sitting over your sit bones at all times. We're not slouching back. And then we're rolling all the way back up. Hands onto the couch beside you, palm down, shoulders away from the ears. We're going to pull our spine up towards the ceiling, grow taller, and then we're going to go up and over towards the side, keeping both sit bones down onto the surface, so no lifting of the bottom. Keep your sitting bones down, and then we're coming all the way back to the middle. Same thing to the other side. Think up and over. Elongate the spine up, and then we go over, keeping both of your sit bones firmly planted into the surface. And all the way back up. One more each side. We go up and over. Elongate the spine towards the ceiling, and then you pull over to the side, the crown of your head reaching both sit bones firmly down into the surface. Last one on the other side. Elongate the spine. Think up and over. Almost like you're growing even taller, elongating the spine even more as we come into the side flexion position. And all the way back up. We're going to stack our arms in front of us like so, shoulders away from the ears. And what we're going to do here is sit nice and tall over our sit bones, elongate the spine using your breastbone, and your ribs are going to twist over to the corner. Imagine your spine like a corkscrew. You're not getting lower in your seat as we're twisting, but instead you're growing taller as we're twisting over to the side. So don't let yourself do this. Sit nice and tall. Think about the movement coming from your breastbone. So your arms are stacked, your shoulders and your breastbone move together, twisting to the side, elongating the spine. Making sure both sit bones are firmly pressed down into the supporting surface here. Don't let your hips lift up. One more each side, crown of the head, reaching for the ceiling. Twisting to each side, breastbone leading the movement. One more. Back to the middle. And we're going to drop the arms. Elbows into the ribs, bending the elbows, palms facing up, nice and wide. We're going into our dumb waiter, which we're opening our arms out to the side and bringing them back in. Shoulders away from the ears, tall spine. Isolating the movement from the shoulder here. Opening and closing. Breathing the entire time. Don't hold your breath. Elongate the spine, both of your sit bones planted firmly into the supporting surface. Long necks, shoulders away from the ears. And then we're going to take this into our Cleopatra. We're going to open the arms into the dumb waiter. Palm down, reach the arms away, elongate those fingertips. And then we're going to bring the elbows back in as we turn the palms up and return to our starting position. Now again, palms facing up, dumb waiter, palms facing down, Cleopatra, reaching those fingertips away, shoulders away from the ears, pulling the elbows back. On the outward movement, you're leading with the fingertips, and on the inward movement, leading with the elbows. Think about opening the chest. Check in with your posture. Is your spine still elongated, or are we starting to do this? Sitting up nice and tall over those sit bones, crown of the head reaching for the ceiling. Breathing as we do this movement, trying to get equal length on both sides. Let's do 2 more. Reaching with the fingertips, elongate the arms away. Pulling back in with the elbows. 1 more. Long spine. And pulling back in. And let's drop the arms down. We're going to do 1 more in seated. Elongate the spine, breath in. And we're going to exhale, bring the arms up behind the head. Do a shoulder shrug, shoulders up to the ears, and drop them down. And if you can, we're going to reach the fingertips up to the ceiling without the shoulders coming. And then we go shoulder shrug, shoulders down, and then reach the arms all the way back down. So you're really trying to isolate the shoulder shrug movement here. Arms up, shoulder shrug, lower down, reaching up to the ceiling, shoulder shrug, lowering down, then both arms all the way down. If your shoulders are bothering you and you're not able to lift your fingers up to the ceiling, that's okay. From here, I want you to lift it out nice and wide. Same thing, and all the way down. So you can either reach the fingertips up to the ceiling on the second shoulder shrug, like so. Or if you can't go up, you can just go out into a sort of a wide V position. Let's do 1 more. Up behind the ears, shoulder shrug, sitting up nice and tall, elongating the spine, reaching up or out. Shoulder shrug, and all the way back down. From here, I'm going to get you to put your hand onto the supporting surface you're sitting on, and we're going to slide our torso down towards the surface, and you're going to bring the feet up into a lying position onto your back. So just take a moment to get into the lying position here. Legs down, arms down. From here, we're going to pull up 1 leg into a bent position. Then we're going to pull up the other leg. You're going to bring those legs together, and you're going to open the toes out, and then open the heels out such that your legs are now parallel. We're going to first go over the 5 Pilates rest position in which we're going to adopt for every exercise. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to form a diamond shape with our hand here. So thumbs together and the fingertips together. So a diamond shape. And then you're going to take your thumb, stick it into your belly button, and then place the rest of your hand down onto your pelvis. So if I turn sideways, you can see got a diamond shape. The thumbs go into the belly button and the rest of the hand comes down. So you got a diamond shape onto your pelvis here. You're going to imagine there's a steel ball, a steel marble sitting in that diamond, and you're going to use your pelvis movement to roll the marble to the very top of that diamond, and then roll the marble to the very bottom of that diamond. And then again, rolling that marble using your pelvis to the very top of the diamond, then to the very bottom of the diamond. So if I move my hand for a second, you can see that it's my pelvis movement, rolling the marble to the top of the diamond, then to the bottom of the diamond over and over again. This is our pelvic tilt.
You can take the hands away from your pelvis if you've now got that movement, or you can keep your hands in that diamond shape on your pelvis if you need a little bit of help to continue with this pelvic tilting. Think about rolling that diamond towards the top, or sorry, the marble to the top of the diamond, then the marble to the bottom of the diamond. And then with every repetition, you're going to make this movement smaller and smaller until you find your neutral pelvis, which is going to be halfway between tipping as far as you can one way and halfway between tipping as far as you can the other way. So you want to find the middle point at which the marble is sitting nicely in the middle of that diamond. And that is your neutral pelvis, which is position 1 of our Pilates rest position. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to gently pull up through your pelvic floor, almost like you sat on something really cold and you went and you tucked up just a tiny bit, holding that position, holding that pelvic floor. That is your second Pilates rest position. Then we're going to think about our ribs. We're going to melt our rib cage down into the bed or into the couch or into the floor that you're lying on, melting the ribs down into the supporting surface without losing your neutral pelvis and without losing your pelvic floor. Then we're going to think about the shoulder blades pressing down into the ground or the supporting surface you're on and sliding them down towards the heels. So your shoulders are down, sliding towards the heels. And then we're going to think about elongating the back of the neck, almost like you've got a little peach underneath your chin. And that is your 5th position of your Pilates rest positions. So you've got 5 things on our checklist. Number 1, maintaining the neutral pelvis. Number 2, pulling up through the pelvic floor. Number 3, ribs melted down into the earth. Number 4, shoulder blades pressing down and away from the ears. And number 5, long back of the neck. Keeping all 5 positions here, we're going to float the arms up towards the ceiling. And then we're going to draw some circles here without losing any of those 5 Pilates rest positions. Keep the ribs melted down into the earth. Keep the back of the neck nice and long. Think about that little peach underneath the chin. Shoulder blades away from the ears and pressing down into the earth. Pulling up through the pelvic floor, maintaining the neutral pelvis. Breathing. And out. As we're drawing our circles here, I want to keep checking in with your posture, making sure you're maintaining your 5 Pilates rest position. It's a little ironic because the positions are called rest positions, but it's not very restful at all. We're using these 5 positions as a sort of a posture check throughout our Pilates exercise today. Let's do 3 more. 2 more. Keep the ribs melted down into the earth. Keep the back of the neck nice and long. And then we're going to float the arms down. We're going to go into our 1 leg stretch here. You're going to slide your heel away from you and then slide the heel back up without losing your 5 Pilates rest position. So don't let your ribs come off the ground. Don't lose that pelvic tilt. Don't lose the pelvic floor contraction. Keep the back of the neck nice and long, sliding the heel away from each other. And you're thinking about a spirit level sitting on the top of your pelvis, and you don't want that little bubble in the middle to move. Selectively sliding 1 leg away at a time, keeping the stationary knee completely still, Almost like you've got a glass of water balancing on top of the kneecap. Make sure you're not holding your breath. Keep the back of the neck nice and long. Ribs melted down into the earth. 2 more. One more. And then from here, we're going to take it up into scissors level 1. We're floating one leg up to a tabletop position. Then we're lowering it back down. Then the second leg floats up into a tabletop position and then lowering it back down. While you're doing this movement, you want to keep your neutral pelvis. So don't let your back do this. You don't want to let the low back lift off the floor. And you're making sure that your ribs are still melted into the earth. And the back of the neck is still nice and long with that imaginary peach underneath your chin. Shoulder blades still pressing down into the earth and sliding away from your ears. Imagine that spirit level sitting on top of your pelvis again. You do not want to let that bubble in the middle move. Keep your pelvis completely neutral. Try not to twist. Check in with your posture, maintaining your 5 Pilates rest position. Breathing. On the next one, we're going to keep that leg up into tabletop. You're going to deepen the contraction in your abdominals and float the second leg up to tabletop. Then lower the first leg down and the second leg down. Repeat on the other side. Float one leg up to tabletop. Deepen the contraction in your tummy muscles and float the second leg up to tabletop without the low back lifting. And we're going to keep repeating this. So I'm moving my arms so you can see as you lift your second leg up to tabletop. Don't let yourself do this. Did you see that? Don't let yourself lift the back off the floor. You want to maintain this contraction nice and still as you're doing this double tabletop position. Make sure you're not holding your breath. Keep the neck nice and long, little peach under the chin. Shoulder blades pressing down into the earth and away from the ears. Rib cage melting down into the floor. Think about that spirit level sitting on top of your pelvis. You don't want that little bubble to move. Use your breath to help you. Think about inhaling to prepare and exhaling to execute. Check in with your 5 Pilates rest position, your posture. Are we still maintaining our pelvic position, or is our low back lifting off the floor? Ribs melted down into the earth. Shoulder blades pressing down and away from the ears. Back of the neck nice and long, little peach under the chin. Let's do 2 more. Deepen the abdominal contraction before you lift your second leg up to tabletop. Think about the spirit level on your pelvis. Keep that little bubble in the middle. And rest for a moment here. We're going to go back to our little diamond shape on our pelvis, pelvic tilting to find our neutral pelvis. Pulling up through the pelvic floor, ribs melted down into the earth, shoulder blades pressing down and away from the ears, long back of the neck, little peach under the chin. From here, I want you to keep that peach, that imaginary peach under the chin, and you're going to float your arms and your shoulders off the floor, thinking about your rib cage pulling down towards the hips and then lowering back down. This is our abdo prep. Think about the ribs moving toward the hips, almost like you got a little buckle and you're buckling the bottom of the ribs into the hips. Keep the back of the neck nice and long, no crunching through the neck. Think about that little peach underneath your chin. If you like to add your breath here, you can join me with inhale to prepare, exhale to lift. Inhale to hold, exhale to release. Keeping that back of the neck nice and long. If your neck is causing you some issues, you're welcome to place your hands behind your head, as long as we're not using our hands to crunch and lift our neck. You still want to keep the back of the neck nice and long. Think about the bottom of the ribs clipping into the hips. Nicely done. Inhale to prepare. Exhale to lift. Inhale to hold. Exhale to lower. Checking with your posture. Is your pelvis still in that neutral position, or are we now crunching through our lower back? Keep the ribs melted down into the earth. Back of the neck nice and long. Imagine that little peach underneath the chin. Last 3. Last 2. Long back of the neck, shoulders away from the ears. Thinking about that spirit level sitting on top of your pelvis. Don't let yourself rotate. And lower the arms back down. Shake your head side to side as if you're saying no, just to release any tension that you may have built up in your neck. And then bring your neck to neutral again. We're now going to go for some shoulder bridges. We're going to think about that pelvic tilting we did earlier, where we're tipping the marble to the very top of that diamond on our pelvis, and then to the very bottom of that diamond. You're going to roll that marble to the very top of the diamond, and then continue the movement of peeling each vertebrae off the floor one at a time until your ribs come off the floor. And then you're going to lower down one vertebrae at a time at the very top of your spine and lowering all the way down the length of your spine. So imagine your spine like a string of pearls on sand. You're pulling one end of the pearls up and then lowering it down. So you're really articulating through the spine here. I'm just moving my arms here. I'm just going to move my arms so you can see. So I'm peeling through, so I'm peeling from my tailbone all the way up my spine, one vertebrae at a time. And then I'm lowering down one vertebrae at a time such that my bottom, my tailbone, is the last thing to come down. So I'm not doing this. I'm not going up in one block, but I'm really peeling each vertebrae off the floor one at a time, and then lowering from the top one vertebrae at a time all the way down. Your arms should be down by your side. but I'm just holding mine up so you can see the movement. Make sure the back of your neck is still nice and long, so we're not crunching through the chin. Really take your time here. This is not about how quick you can do this movement or how many times you can do it. You're trying to really articulate through your spine, through your vertebrae here. Hopefully you feel a little bit of burning into your bottom muscles and the back of your thighs. Really articulating through that spine the entire time. Don't let the knees open too wide and don't let the knees come in together. Your legs should be hip width apart. Articulating through that spine. Making sure that when you are at the top of your bridge, we're not lifting, crunching through the back. And you see here that I'm just lifting from the back. That's too high. Make sure you're in one straight line. So don't let yourself crunch through the neck and don't let yourself use the back to arch. You're thinking about rolling up one vertebrae at a time and then pressing down one vertebrae at a time such that your tailbone is the very last thing to come down. One more. Check in with your breathing. Are we holding our breath? Hopefully not. And lowering down one vertebrae at a time. And then you can hug your knees into your chest just for a moment. Just have a breather here. You're welcome to roll side to side if you like. Or you can just hold your knees into your chest for 2 breaths. One more. And lower the legs back down. We're going to roll onto our side now. So take a moment, turning onto your side. We're going to bend our knees here, and you're going to check in with your posture. You want your feet to be in line with the hip, in line with the shoulder. So you don't want the leg to be in front, and you don't want it to be too far behind. You want the feet to be in line with the hip, in line with the shoulders. From here, you're going to imagine your top hip is being pulled towards the feet such that you create a little gap under your spine here. We're not collapsing. We're pulling the top hip down towards the feet such that you have a little gap under your spine. We're going to think about our 5 Pilates rest position still. We're thinking about our pelvis being in a neutral position, so we're not crunching behind, but we're not doing this either. We're keeping our spine in a neutral position, pulling up through the pelvic floor. Think about the ribs melting back into our spinal column, shoulders away from the ears, head and neck nice and long. So we're not doing this, we're not doing this, we're keeping our neck nice and long. Think about that top hip pulling down to the feet still, so you got that little gap under your spine. And maintaining this position, we're going to think about the front of our hips having some headlights like a car. Right now, the headlights are pointing towards the wall in front of you. I want you to tip down slightly, so it's pointing down towards the bottom corner of the room. Maintaining that gap under your spine. We're going to go into some clamshells, opening the top knee and lowering it back down. You're keeping your feet together, but you're opening that top knee. And all the while, when you're doing this movement, we're thinking about the headlights pointing slightly down towards the floor. So we're not doing this. We're keeping the headlights pointing slightly down towards the floor. And you're keeping that gap underneath your spine by pulling the top hip towards your feet. Check in with your posture. Make sure your shoulder is away from the ears. Your ribs are melted back into the spinal column. Your supporting hands should just be touching fingertips to the floor or the couch that you're on. So we're not gripping, light touch. And you'll find here, if you're truly thinking about pointing the headlights at the front of the hips down towards the floor, it's actually kind of difficult to lift very high. And that's absolutely fine because we want to try to maintain the technique of these exercises of really using the glute muscles. So we're not trying to roll with our hips. We're trying to maintain the headlights pointing down to the floor. You should really feel that engagement on the side and the back of the hips here. Keep thinking about that gap underneath your spine. You're pulling that top hip down to the floor. Keep the neck nice and long. Breathing as you're doing this movement. So breathing out to open and lower. Nicely done. Check in with your posture, back of the neck nice and long. Try not to flare the ribs forward. Keep the ribs melted back into the spinal column. Maintain the gap underneath your spine, underneath your side. Think about the front headlights of the hips pointing down to the floor the entire time. Last 5 in your own time. 4, 3, last 2, last 1, and rest for a second. You can rub out the side of your hips if you need. And then we're going to get right back into our next exercise. So starting with our checklist, thinking about the hip being pulled towards your feet such that you create a gap underneath your spine. You're going to think about the ribs melted back into your spinal column, shoulders away from the ears, back of the neck nice and long, almost like you got a little peach underneath your chin. From here, we're going to float the top leg up so that your legs are parallel, and then you're going to bring them back down. So you're floating them up. Keep the shin parallel to the floor. Don't let your feet be higher or your knee be higher. You want the shin to be completely level and bring it back down. Shin parallel to the floor. On the next one, we're going to hold this position. Imagine you got a glass tabletop underneath that top leg and you're just dusting. You're bringing the leg forward and back, dusting across the top of that glass table. Now, as I'm doing this, you'll notice my shin is still parallel to the floor at all times. I'm not doing this or this. I'm keeping my shin completely level and parallel to the floor. The knee and the heel are at the same height. And I'm still maintaining that gap under my spine the entire time. Make sure that gap between your thighs remain the same. And I'm trying not to twist as I'm doing this position. You're keeping yourself nice and solid. The only thing that should be moving is that top leg, shoulders away from the ears. So if I covered up that moving leg and I was looking at the rest of your body, it should not look like you're moving at all. Maintain that gap underneath the spine by pulling that top hip to the floor, or sorry, to the feet. And you're just dusting that top leg across the imaginary glass table. As you're moving that leg forward and back, try not to let the leg sink down as you come forward or sink down as you go back. You want to maintain that same distance between the two thighs at all times. Shin parallel to the floor. Check in with your posture. Don't let your ribs flare. Keep the ribs melted back into your spinal column. Keep the gap underneath your spine. Shoulders away from the ears. Try not to grip on for dear life with the other hand. You're using your fingertips to support you here, but we're not holding on too hard. Back of the neck nice and long. Make sure you're not holding your breath. Good. Let's do one more. Knee and foot should be at the same level, not higher than the other. And let's lower down, rub out the side of your hip. We're gonna roll onto the other side. I'm gonna sit up and go to the other side because I want to face you. But at home, I want you to just roll onto your other side. Now, we're gonna start with our knees bent. We're thinking about the feet being in line with the hip, in line with the shoulder, right? So we don't want the legs too far forward and we don't want them too far back. You want the feet to be in line with the hips, in line with the shoulders. From here, we're going to start with our positioning. We're thinking about the top hip pulling down towards the feet such that you got a little gap under your spine. Your ribs are melting back into your spinal column so they're not flaring out in front. Fingertips touching down onto the surface that you're lying on without gripping. And your shoulders are going to be away from the ears, back of the neck nice and long, as if you got a little peach under your chin. Holding this position here, think about the front of the hips having headlights. Right now, they're pointing forward. We want to point them slightly down towards the ground without losing that gap underneath your spine, right? So we want to pull that top hip down to the feet, and then you're thinking about those headlights pointing slightly towards the floor. From here, we're going to go into our clamshells, maintaining the gap underneath our spine and the front of the hips pointing down towards the floor. We're going to open that top knee and lower down. Remember, we're not doing this. We're not swinging back because we're thinking about the front of our hips, the headlights pointing down towards the floor, and we're keeping it that way. So again, on this side, you'll notice that you can't actually open the knee super wide because as soon as you open super wide, your headlights are now tipping at the ceiling. And that's okay. We want the headlights to be pointing towards the floor. So you're really squeezing that hip muscle to keep you in this position. I'm just going to move back a tiny bit. Check in with yourself. Make sure the gap under your spine is still there. We're not sinking back. We're squaring the hip the entire time. Shoulders away from the ears. Rib cage melting back into your spine. Nice long neck. Imagine that little peach under the chin. I know there's lots of imagery here, but it helps with the posture and positioning of the body so you can get the most out of the exercise. Make sure we're not holding our breath, breathing. It helps to exhale on the execution of the movement. Make sure we're not flaring the ribs forward and we're not twisting that pelvis. Keep that spine nice and neutral. Shoulders away from the ears. The gap is still underneath our spine and the headlights are still pointing down towards the floor. Nicely done. Let's do 5 more in your own time. Keep the headlights pointing down towards the earth, shoulder away from the ears. Long neck. Keep that gap under your spine. Don't hold the breath, keep breathing. When you finish your 5, you can have a rest. You can rub out your hip if you like. And then we're going to get right back into it. Make sure your feet are still stacked, in line with your hips, in line with the shoulders. We're going to think about pulling the top hip down towards the feet. So let me do that again. Down to the feet such that the hips are on one level. And we're going to place the fingertips down onto the supporting surface without gripping. Shoulders away from the ears, ribs melted back into your spinal column so they're not flaring forward. Melted back into the spinal column, long back of the neck. From here, we're going to float our top leg up such that the thighs are parallel to each other, the shin is parallel to the floor. So remember, we're not lifting the knee higher, or the foot higher, we want the knee and the foot to be completely level, so parallel. You want the shin to be parallel to the floor. And as you're doing this opening position, make sure you check to see if the bottom of your spine is still lifted off the ground or the couch, whatever surface you're on. If not, pull that top hip down to the feet again, so you can find that space, that gap underneath your spine. And when you're ready, you're going to now slide the leg forward and back as if it's dusting that glass table, the same as what we did on the other side, keeping that gap underneath your spine, shoulders away from the ears. You're sliding the leg forward and back, keeping the shin parallel to the floor. So remember, we're not doing this, we're not doing this, we're keeping the knee and the foot completely level so that the shin is parallel to the floor, and you're maintaining that gap underneath your spine, and you're trying not to twist like this as you're moving. Make sure the gap between your thighs are equal at all times. So as you come forward and back, don't let yourself drop that leg down, keep it up. Same with when you go back, don't let that leg drop down. You want to keep it up. Oops, I'm kicking the wall behind me here. Hopefully you've got more space at home. Check in with the posture. Are your shoulders away from the ears still? What about your neck? Still nice and long with that peach under the chin? Make sure you got that gap underneath your spine still. Shin parallel to the floor. Nicely done. Let's do 3 more in your own time. Remember, don't let yourself twist. If I covered your moving leg and I looked at the rest of your body, it shouldn't look like you're moving at all. So keep the rest of your body completely still, like you're a statue. And the leg is the only motorized part of the statue that's moving. Maintain that gap under the spine. And then when you've done your 3, lower that leg, give it a little rub on the side of the hip. And then from here, we're going to bring ourselves up into a seated position. Take your time. Don't want you to get dizzy getting up. And then we're going to come into a sitting position, feet flat onto the floor. We're going to stack the arms again, just like we did at the beginning, feet flat, sitting up nice and tall over your sitting bones. Elongate the spine towards the ceiling, shoulders away from the ears. And you're going to think about the shoulders and the breastbone moving as one block, rotating to the side, keeping that spine nice and long, nice and tall on top of your sit bones as you're twisting, almost like you're a corkscrew. You're growing taller as you're twisting, not lower, taller as you're twisting. Notice here if you're getting a little more movement than you did at the beginning. Hopefully you are. Remember, it's not the arms moving, it's the shoulders and the breastbone moving as one unit. Nice and tall. 1 more each side. Last time on the other side. And then we lower the arms down. You can drop them down beside you if you've got room. And we're going to now go into our spinal roll downs and ups. So we're going to tuck that chin down towards our chest. And we're going to slowly roll 1 vertebrae down at a time. So imagine your vertebrae stacked like Legos. You're tipping 1 down at a time. When you can't go anymore, you're going to roll all the way back up, stacking each vertebrae on top of the other, 1 at a time. And then again, you can feel free to take your time on this. one vertebrae at a time, all the way down. And all the way back up. Make sure we're not holding any tension in our neck. Let's do one last one. Rolling down. This time at the very bottom of our spinal roll down, we're going to stay here. I want you to hang loose like a rag doll. And in this position, we're going to shake our head no and nod our head yes. Just to make sure we're nice and loose. And then we're going to roll all the way back up. Bring your feet a little bit closer to your supporting surface. We're going to take the arms, we're going to sweep them down. Breath in. Up overhead. Breathing out. And again, breath in. Reaching the arms overhead. Breath out. And you are done. Thank you very much for joining us for our Pilates session. I'm just going to move forward. Hopefully you enjoyed that and it wasn't too difficult. I wanted to make sure we're starting a little bit slower, a little bit more gradual so you can get used to some of the movement. And I'm going to put our email in the chat box here in case you had any questions about any of the exercises we did today. You're of course welcome to send us an email. Or if you have any questions, you're welcome to write it in the chat box. You're welcome to raise your hand if you like, and I can always unmute you and you can ask verbally if you don't want to ask via typing, or if you don't have any questions, absolutely fine as well. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope I see you next week. Remember, the session is recorded, so if you did want to review anything, you're welcome to do so in your own time. Hopefully the video will be up in the next week or so. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining. Hopefully you were able to see and hear everything okay. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks. See you next week.